I want to thank Lori, I want to thank Mark and Dan and Cheryl for their comments today, and I want to open it up to members of the press. If you'd like to ask questions, our group would be happy to entertain them. Joel?
Our former Secretary of State, Ralph Monroe, has a joke that he is often told, and that is that there are two Washingtons in terms of politics. The Space Needle Washington, everything that you can see from atop the familiar needle nearby, and the old snowy Washington, namely everything you can see from a summit in the Goat Rocks where you can look into southwestern Washington and eastern Washington. Is this a Space Needle Washington movement, and what is being done to work it in old snowy Washington?
I'm happy to answer that question. In the month of February, we all enjoyed the Seahawks Washington. And Seahawks Washington was a Washington that was united around a football team. And in the polling that we at the Washington Alliance for Gun Responsibility have conducted over the last year or so, we discovered that the Seahawks are popular in Washington State, but universal criminal background checks on gun purchases are even more popular than the Seattle Seahawks. So it doesn't matter if it's on the Space Needle side or on the snowy side, people of Washington State are ready for responsible gun legislation. And what's being done? Well, one thing that was done and continues to reap rewards for us is that we gathered 345,000, more actually than 345,000 signatures for Initiative 594. And the signatures were gathered in every single county and every single legislative district in Washington State. And what we came to understand was there is one Washington when it comes to gun responsibility, and that one Washington is going to be speaking throughout this campaign and in November when Initiative 594 becomes the law.
This question is for either prosecutors. You touched on it, Mr. Rode, not too long ago, in regards to criminals having guns. The reality is that criminals are criminals for a reason, and they can obtain guns, and they don't care about the law. They don't care about the initiatives. What other steps are you going to take outside of 594 that would get the guns out of the black market, where they essentially don't care about the background checks?
It is probably true that most of the guns used in crimes have been stolen, in burglaries, have been floating around in that same illegal stream of commerce that guns and other contraband floats around. We don't actually know, because we don't have any really good data where that comes from. What we do know, though, is it's quite possible for somebody who has a felony record or somebody who's under the age of 18 to go and buy a gun today with a couple clicks of the mouse, to find somebody on the internet who's willing to sell them that gun, no questions asked. And all we're doing with this proposal is to ask the questions that need to be asked, so that 100% of the gun sales that happen legally in our community happen after a background check. We're not going to get rid of all crime. We're not going to get rid of all violence, but we can take away the easy ones, the source that we know is out there right now, where no questions are asked. We're simply saying, let's ask some questions.
Yeah. In the world that we live in, the many often have to deal with a little minor inconvenience because of the acts of a few. Every time I open a bottle of aspirin, for criminy sakes, I curse that woman who so many years ago poisoned the Tylenol. Because now you got everything safety sealed, and we all put up with that, right? When you got to open a bottle of aspirin for your arthritis, but it's hard because your arthritis to open it. I don't like standing in line for an hour at the airport, taking off my shoes and setting them up in a bin where people can say, "Woof, whose shoes are those?" But we do it. And since those things have been happening, I don't know that we've had more poisonings like that Tylenol poisonings. I don't know that we've had another 9/11 here within the U.S. borders. So it can help, and we all deal with those inconveniences. That's why I said, do I think this is going to be a gigantic, enormous silver bullet that's going to end violent crime and gun violence? Of course not. You know, I wasn't born yesterday. I've been around a long time. But when I make my decision, I look at, okay, let's say the worst case scenario, it only prevents a few gun deaths. That's good enough for me.
Are there other questions? Yes.
With dueling initiatives, to get some of the signatures on the ballot for you, Second Amendment folks said a lot of money came in for you from Bloomberg. So with this dueling initiatives coming in November, how much more money do you think may be coming in from Bloomberg from out of state to help support 594?
That sounds to me like a great question for our campaign director, Zach Silk.
Hi all, my name is Zach Silk. I'm the manager for the 594 campaign in the Washington Alliance for Gun Responsibility. You know, we've really had an incredible showing of Washingtonian support for this initiative. We've raised over $1.5 million. That's almost exclusively inside of Washington State. We have 3,500 individual donors, and it is true that the Mayors Against Illegal Guns has made a small contribution to the campaign. It amounts to about $30,000 of that $1.5 million. But we actually expect this to be a Washington-driven effort. You know, we've seen the broadest, best part of our community come together to fund this. As you've seen, the incredible broad support here today. And we expect that the gun lobby will spend millions of dollars to defeat us, as they did in 1997 and as they have done in other places. And we're going to all have to stand together and dig deep in order to stand up to them. But I'm confident this community will do that. Do you have anything else? Okay. Thank you.
Oh, I think Linda had a... Yes, go ahead.
A question about the dueling initiatives. What do you say to the sponsors of the opposing initiative about what they are proposing?
Zach, if you'd like to cover that.
Sure. Well, first of all, it's pretty clear to us that the fastest way to defeat a popular measure is to put an alternative on the ballot. And it seems to us that this was likely disingenuous. I mean, even the NRA has said that 591 will have no impact. They testified that in Olympia. And so it's our feeling that this is really a disingenuous way to confuse voters. It has two major impacts. The first is to confuse voters, and the second is to prevent us from instituting universal background checks in Washington State. It requires us to wait on the federal government, and as we've all seen over the last several years, we can't wait for anything to come out of Congress. We have to do it ourselves. And so I think what we understand is that this is intended to be confusing to voters and effectively prevent us from having universal background checks. And we believe Washington voters are smart enough to reject 591.
Obviously, there's no, this question for you. Obviously, there's no price you can put on a human life.
Sure.
But what is the cost of, once 594 is implemented, what is the projected cost to keep it sustained?
Well, we haven't actually seen any cost estimates. My guess is we'll see that as the campaign unfolds. Most of it is administrative. The way that background checks are currently conducted, we are simply extending the current system to all sales. So there are no new systems that will have to be implemented, but there is new capacity that will have to be realized. And that'll be capacity that needs to happen both at the state level and then also what happens at the federal level through the background check system that's administered by the federal government. So there will be some costs, but it's relatively minor given what we know. And there are other states. We will not be the first state to implement universal background checks. There are many other states that do this, including Colorado, that just implemented this last year and has seen tremendous success already, and it has not been a large administrative burden for them, and they've been able to implement the system successfully. So.
When you say tremendous success,
yeah, they have something like about I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, and we can get that to you, but it's approximately 8,000 private sales have gone through background checks since it's been implemented, and roughly 90 of them have been rejected. So in other words, these were private sales that under the previous system they would have met in a parking lot and exchanged their guns, no questions asked. But under this current system, they went to a dealer, and the dealer ran a background check, and nearly 90 of those people were rejected. In other words, they had a reason to not buy a gun. So when you talk about this having no impact, it's actually not true. As Prosecutor Satterberg was referencing, we will not be able to eliminate criminals getting guns, but we can dramatically reduce it and make it much harder. And as we're seeing in Colorado, it does work. So.
There are some large populations near the borders like Spokane, Vancouver, so on and so forth, Idaho being a very gun-happy state. in regards, what are some of the things that you're looking at when it comes to boundaries like that? Importing guns from gun owners, registering it locally.
Yeah, I think that, it has always been our preference that there were going to be a federal solution to this. It's really difficult to have a patchwork solutions, but the reality is we know the federal government's not going to ask, and so we need to do our best effort. The one thing that I can say is that Oregon did close their gun show loophole about 20 years ago or 15 years ago, and California does have a universal background check system. So we would create a Mexico to Canada West Coast here that would have a strong background check systems. It's not perfect, of course, and we'll have to do some partnerships with Oregon and Idaho to figure out how to make this system work better. We also hope that Oregon will go on and institute a full universal background check system, which would make us all under the same laws across those 3 states.
Zach, okay. Several speakers talked about the powerful gun lobby.
Yeah.
What do you think you do need in the war chest reform 594 for TV ads?
Sure.
All that as November approaches?
Well, we know that a competitive campaign in Washington State is a multi-million-dollar campaign. We expect that this will look a lot like the large, serious campaigns that have happened in the last couple of cycles. We know the gun lobby in 1997 outspent those looking for stronger gun laws about 4 to 1. So under kind of a modern system, you could expect them to be $10 to $20 million, and we hope to be able to be competitive with them.
But still, it's easier to campaign against something.
Correct.
As I recall from 1997, it had a lead of about 65-35.
Yeah.
They almost literally reversed that. In fact, even celebrated the day when the polls crossed.
Yeah, I would say that a range of things have changed, of course, since 1997. 1997, of course, was not only a long time ago by virtue of the political landscape in Washington State has changed really fundamentally since then. The second thing is that we've really partnered very closely with Ceasefire, who was at the lead of that, and we learned a lot of valuable lessons from the 1997 experience. And part of that lesson was to make sure that we made a very straightforward, simple initiative that addressed a readily identifiable problem. And we have all of that in 594. Secondly, we needed to build a large volunteer support system that stretched across the state. Every single corner of the state is represented in what we've done. As Sandy alluded to, we've collected signatures in every county and every legislative district. And we intend to build a volunteer force in every single county in the state. And then I think the third and most important thing is that we've been able to get out ahead and build a really well-financed campaign. I mean, at the end of the day, these are very expensive endeavors, and it really requires being able to go toe-to-toe with the gun lobby means that you need to be able to go toe-to-toe financially with them, and we're confident we can do that.
How does it feel to be on the same side with the Catholic bishops on this one?
It's actually one of the great joys working on this issue. For those of you who don't know, I ran the marriage equality campaign, and we were at quite a bit of odds with the Catholic bishops during that campaign. And on this issue, I think this is one of the rare unifying issues where all people of faith and anyone who has a strong moral compass can stand together, and it's an honor to have the Catholic bishops standing with us. So, okay, thank you.
I think we have time for one more question, if there's another question. Very nice. Thank you all very much. I'm from the press, or yes? Oh, Jeannie, of course. Absolutely.
I'm Jean Colwell, State Senator. This is my district. I have to admit, I bristle a little bit when people say, the state legislature turned its back and, not caring. I think it's important to know that many of us are strongly supportive of this initiative and have been sponsors of legislation for a long, long, long time. And it's very frustrating for us to be part of the legislature that will not be responsive. But this is a big campaign year. The whole House is up, half the Senate, and I hope that the campaign will really try to hold the candidates accountable and get them involved in this campaign for those who want to and for those who don't. Make a point of it, and they're nice.
Absolutely. Jean, thank you very much. Dean, thank you for your work over many years and work of other electeds who are here in the audience as well. I just about said congregation. And as well as Catholic bishop support, I want to call out the Jewish Federation of Seattle, which is here. And I was thinking back to the fact that the tragedy around Cheryl happened at the Jewish Federation, and one of the strongest faith-based communities that is supporting Initiative 594 is the Jewish community at large, but specifically the Jewish Federation of Seattle. So thank you so much. The campaign begins today, and we people, you can donate over there indeed, and we people of faith are behind this with our prayers, and we know that we are behind it as well with our work, our shoe leather, and our strong support, and it's such a delight to be part of such a very broad coalition that's going to make positive change happen in Washington State to help reduce gun violence. Thank you all for being here today.